few days ago, I was lucky enough to get my first NASA press release on the vampire star I discovered with Kepler. In particular, it's a dwarf nova I found in archival Kepler data. And this story generated a lot of interest, and I had journalists all over the world asking me questions about my research. And that wasn't something I was expecting, and it was certainly very exciting for me to be able to share my research with all these people. And as I saw the articles appearing online, that was very exciting as well, actually seeing what I'd been doing pushed out to the world. And all of the articles were fantastic, save for the article from the Mirror, where they decided it was very necessary to show us all what vampires were, or at least what their teeth were. But the Mirror was its own special case, so we'll just leave that be. What was also pretty interesting, for me at least, was looking at the comments that were on these articles. So I thought it might be fun for a video to go through some of these comments and address any questions that there might be in them. We'll start out with the comments on the article written by Stuff, which is a media group in New Zealand, so dear to my heart, being from the same country as me. Possibly the best comment on this article is from Sarah, who asked Josh, "Did you find it?" Now, Josh goes on to say yes, he did find it, but we all know that's a lie. Another very interesting comment was from Robert, "A white hole?" Lol. Well, this is an interesting question. What are white holes? Well, they're a theoretical construct that is kind of the opposite of a black hole. So they might sit in space and spew out a whole lot of material instead of sucking in material like a black hole does. There are some theories that suggest perhaps a black hole leads to a white hole somewhere else in our universe or a greater multiverse. But so far we've got no evidence to support these theories. In this case, we're very confident that it is a white dwarf because it looks and behaves exactly as a white dwarf should. Moving on to astronomy news, there's a good question from Paragon22, who asks, "The most incomprehensible thing in this system, why was the brown dwarf so close to the white dwarf? Where did he come from?" This is actually a really good question. It's one that I asked myself and my collaborators when we'd worked out what this type of object was. And the short answer to it is that the system is incredibly old and has evolved through tidal and gravitational interactions over the course of, say, 3 billion years or so. And over that time, the orbital separation slowly decreases until it gets as insanely close as what it is today, which is pretty much the distance between the Earth and the Moon. So these systems are really extreme in that regard, and it takes a long time for them to get to that situation. On this side as well, there's a much longer comment in question from a user known by Black Hole, and it reads, "Well, why so dramatize an ordinary event, the process, the infant years of a white dwarf? It can be done in a milder way, for example, sucking from the parent vital components for growth and existence in the future, like all normal stars. At the expense of the outbreak, we can say several options that can occur at this stage of newborns, such as white dwarfs, (infants). The first of these is when the formation of a new planet, such as Mercury, begins from the sucked out substance (plasma ball). Of the second is when one of the planets, like Venus, joins, gaining an orbit around these triple systems and many other processes in this bustling process of birth and the formation of new planetary system." Very interesting. As I mentioned before, this is actually a really old system, so we're not looking at something which is just forming a new star. A white dwarf is the core of a star like our Sun, which has gone through its entire evolutionary process and died after billions of years, puffing off all of its outer layers and leaving the white dwarf core behind. And the companion, you could think of something like a really heavy Jupiter. So this isn't the case of a solar system forming. This is a case of a star-like object in its death throes stealing from its friend. which is where the vampire analogy comes from. So those were the comments on Astro News. Interesting. Let's move now to RT Worldwide, where there's a much larger assortment of interesting comments. One of the comments we have is from a user called John, who has this great comment. Bunch of CGI nonsense. Fake. Here's another 20 billion to get you through the month, NASA. And that is certainly an interesting take. CGI nonsense? I'm not sure what exactly is CGI. The artist's impression, perhaps you could consider that CGI, but what Kepler did wasn't CGI. But anyway, there are some replies to this comment, so it gets ever more interesting. One reply says, "What is CGI nonsense and fake? Please specify exactly." I'm also interested to see what this CGI nonsense is, since it is my own work. A reply to that from another user says, "If Kepler recorded anything, why don't NASA release it?" That's a very good question. Why don't NASA release it? Well, the truth is, they have released it. You can access, anyone can access, all of the data recorded by Kepler. This is how I've done my research. I've gone to the archive where all of the data is stored, and I've downloaded all of the Kepler data and searched through all of it. So if you looked in the same data set that I looked at, you would come to the exact same conclusions as what I came to. And a reply to this comment about NASA releasing data is pretty interesting. It says, "Would you understand the data?" And that user replies, "No, but the information and knowledge shouldn't be kept." And the user replies, "No, but the information and knowledge shouldn't be kept secret for the privileged few." So there you have it. I'm part of the privileged few, and by downloading the Kepler data, which is publicly available, you too can become one of the privileged few. It doesn't matter if you understand what you actually see in the Kepler data, you can be part of this privileged few. Jesus. Here's another good one from RT Worldwide. "This is a load of rubbish. Seriously, NASA, we don't believe your stories anymore. Please look at all the moon landing footage you lost instead of wasting our time." What footage was lost? Very interesting. I've got nothing really to add to this. Moon landings were real, Kepler's real, this thing was real. And there was another much longer comment which says, "In different principles, disk formation is seeking to least interactive formation of mass, meaning tendency to less energy potential state, by forming a plane rather than a spherical form. We see this a reaction that polarizes light, so the Earth's atmosphere should be denser in the plane of the solar system. Interpreting sucking of a gas giant is seeking to a lesser potential, so description by appearance may not be as descriptive as real energetic description." Some of that's right. The idea that disks have a lower potential is more or less right. If you have a big spherical object rotating in space, it will naturally tend towards a disk. So this is true. It is a lower energy potential than the big sphere. The rest of it I don't quite understand. And now for one more interesting comment from RT Worldwide, which reads, "From pure clarity, exactly how many people are employed in producing the science fiction, I wonder? Seems to be no shortage of these less than believable articles about places and objects that only exist in the imaginations of a few. Fortunately for me, I'm one of those that are employed for this supposed fiction, and there are probably thousands to millions of people around the world which work on this fiction. And I would just like to set the record straight and say that we don't get paid nearly enough to maintain this lie. So those were some of the more interesting comments that I saw on the articles I looked at, but there was one thing that I didn't need to look for. I received an email after the stories all went up, which is very long and very interesting. So how about I read it for you? It reads, "Hi experts in white and brown dwarf stars and dimming star Betelgeuse. Hope you are not scared to see white dwarf star eating brown star and star Betelgeuse getting dimmer. I said many times to my pen pal, it's all a magic. White star is not eating brown star, nor star Betelgeuse is ready to explore it. The neutron or DNA Indra is the magician. Here the white and brown dwarf stars must be a binary star system, brackets RNA, that are orbiting DNA. And star Betelgeuse can't be a loner. It must be part of a binary star system, brackets RNA, with a companion star, which their friend is unable to see. Why? This is the reason. For example, imagine both of you, me and their friend, standing on the Airy beach, looking towards middle of Airy Lake. Saw two fishing boats moving away from you in the dark evening. First boat in front far away, second boat behind and closer to you. The boats are going around a large, tall, black granite rock sitting in the middle of the lake. Assume it's always existed there. Also, let us say the two boats have been going around the black rock formation from left side to right side, missing bumping into the rock. First boat in front or far away goes slowly, and the second boat closer goes faster. Given that, what do you observe through binocular? As the boats keep going forward, first boat disappears behind rock, and second boat, star Betelgeuse, gets dimmer. Then after a while, second boat reappears, brackets white dwarf star, followed by a second boat, brackets brown dwarf star. Does this make sense? Binary stars take birth from DNA around the same time as equals and merge with DNA around the same time, along with planets, moons, and rest of life. And everything will be back again and again. That's the mystery. Only Veda Manu knew that knowledge of pure science, not Asura. 99.99% of us. Wonderful. Well, unfortunately, I'm not really too sure what they're talking about here. I've read it through a few times, and it still doesn't quite make sense to me. There's really no evidence to suggest any of the claims in this email. The idea that binary star systems are like DNA is a pretty one, but it doesn't have any scientific evidence to back it. And the idea that this discovery is somehow related to the dimming of Betelgeuse is also not quite right. The data that I found the vampire star in was from 2017, which is pretty much 2 years before the dimming events started taking place. So, in this case, I'm going to say that that's probably not a reliable source of information. So this has been fun for me, at least, looking through these different comments of varying degrees of, say, scientificness. If you have seen any other articles or comments online which you'd like me to look into and perhaps try and put some context behind, let me know. They might also be fun to read. Anyway, it's been a really cool experience for me with this first press release, and here's hoping for another one in the near future. Thanks for watching.